Hello and welcome back to the part 2 of the candidate forum with 3 Democratic candidates for state representative for the 14th Middlesex District, which consists of precincts 7 through 11 here in Chelmsford, all of Carlisle, and parts of Concord and Acton. And with me today we have the 3 Democratic candidates, Vivian Birchall, Simon Cataldo, and Pat Wojtas. So we had the introductions in part 1 of this candidate forum, so we're going to get right into the issues. So the first topic we have for this one is, how can the state help increase the inventory of affordable housing, which is so important here in Massachusetts? It seems to be so difficult for young people and others to afford the housing here in our state. And this is open to anyone to begin.
I can start. As someone who desperately needs affordable housing, I'm still renting because I still haven't found an affordable home for my family and I. But so, again, I have studied and looked at all the different strategies to increase housing in this district, specifically also in Acton, where I live. And the challenges have been with zoning, with just available contract, those who are, what are they called? People who make the homes, who build the homes. Those who build the homes. Developers, that's the word. Thank you so much. I'm speaking in my third language just for the benefit of the viewers. Sometimes I take a while to get the right word. But the developers need incentives to build affordable housing because it's not that profitable. Yeah. So one of the things that I would want to see being done, to increase this stock is, one, rehabilitate old buildings, because that way we're not increasing the footprint. We're just restoring old buildings to make them maybe multifamily units that are affordable. And also, we are lucky to have 40Bs, but 40Bs sometimes are not even that affordable. And even though the 40Bs are high-end, they're also being fought by the people in the towns. So the other thing I would want to, I mentioned zoning earlier, to change the zoning. Some of the buildings are grandfathered. You can't even touch them, so people fear to touch them. But also, so if we change the zoning language to allow for certain structures to be changed into affordable housing, I think that would be great. In addition to that, the transit-oriented housing is something that I strongly support, so that we have very high-density buildings near rail stations. And to make that work, expand parking for train stations, so that people can, have somewhere to leave their cars. And in addition to that, just increase the 1-mile distance in transportation from the car to the train station for those who cannot get there, who do not live right by that place. And that will also interest people to live in towns like Acton, Concord, Carlisle, and Chelmsford.
Thank you. Thank you.
As Vivian just explained, there are a lot of different facets to our housing crisis. And I think it's universally accepted right now that we have a crisis of housing affordability and housing supply. I think that we are going to need to prioritize. So here's where I'd prioritize. I'd prioritize on the capital maintenance needs of our existing stock of public housing, veterans housing, and vulnerable senior housing. There's a significant amount of it here in Chelmsford, and the state is not being a good partner in making sure that we can keep those as dignified places to live. So we need more money for our existing housing stock. We also need to allow the localities to come up with solutions that work for them. And that concerns flexible zoning and accessory dwelling units. We do not need more $3 million houses, but we do have a lot of large houses that could be subdivided into multifamily units. And I think that for our particular district, those are the places to start.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, I agree with what's already been said. In Chelmsford, as you know, there's been a lot of 40B activity in the past, 12 years, such that we've exceeded the 10% that's mandated by the 40B law for affordable housing. But, there still needs to be more. There still is a big demand for more. The Chelmsford Housing Authority, runs the lottery for for the housing that they have control over. And some people sit on that list, that waiting list, to get to the top for 5, 6, 7 years, and that's unacceptable. So we do need to have more housing. I think a lot of it is zoning. There was a recent change where now to make a zoning change, if it has to do with affordable housing and more dense housing, you only need a 50% threshold at town meeting rather than what used to be, a 2/3 majority. So that makes it a little bit easier to pass zoning changes. And I think the other thing that Vivian alluded to might be the MBTA communities, where each community is required to at least have a plan for public housing, low-income housing, or affordable housing, let's call it affordable housing, near transportation hubs, near train stations, even along bus routes. But I think that goes along with that is the transportation part of it. Carlisle has almost no transportation, but they also don't really have much appetite for affordable housing. If something were to be done in the town of Carlisle, they would have to, maintain the character of that community, as all the housing in the other communities already does. So, they're probably never going to get to their 10% as far as 40B, but there's always the goal and the willingness to try to get there. So I think those are some of the things that need to be considered.
Thank you.
Tom, could we just talk a little bit more about the MBTA communities? I think it's very well intentioned. It doesn't work for our district. So Carlisle, if you've been to Carlisle, you know it's a rural 2-acre zoning town. They were for some reason characterized as an MBTA adjacent community. That makes no sense. It's not right for Carlisle. So we need to make sure that our state rep is in there rolling up their sleeves and making sure that these unfunded mandates actually make sense for our towns in the district, in Chelmsford, Carlisle, Acton, and Concord.
Yes, thank you. Well, our next topic has to do with a proposed ballot question. And that is, what are your thoughts about the proposed ballot question to increase the tax rate from 5% to 9% on those earning over $1 million a year?
I support it.
Okay, you support it going from 5% to 9% for those earning more than $1 million a year here in Massachusetts?
I think what you're talking about is a fair share amendment. Okay. And we struggle with funding for some of our infrastructure here, and there is no, I can't think of something that would provide more funding faster than just making the people who earn more than $1 million just to give their fair share. And that money comes back to the local governments to help with our transportation, to fund the control of PFAS. PFAS is one of the unfunded mandates that we have in this.
What was that?
The treatment of PFAS, the chemicals in the water.
Oh,
so the water
in
districts do not get support from the state. So as a priority, if we had extra funds that could come in to support that kind of infrastructure, transportation, water, maybe retrofitting old buildings, people who live in very old buildings that we're trying to fight climate change. And, we can't if we leave certain communities behind. In Acton, for example, there's a housing and climate justice group, which I have had a number of meetings with, just talking about how to engage renters and into these conversations that fight climate change. But having advocacy is one thing, and getting funding to do to implement some of the proposals they have is a different one. And the fair share money that comes from that could really support these local communities in many ways.
Thank you, Vivian.
Just to clarify, the fair share amendment income could not go to PFAS. The fair share amendment income would be earmarked for education and transportation. In general, I wouldn't be in favor of that type of earmarking. In this particular situation, we have people literally jumping out of an Orange Line train into a river because we have long let languish investments that need to happen in transportation, in our public transit system. And we've already talked at length during this segment and the last segment about some of the needs that we have in our public education system. So I support the fair share amendment.
To go from 5% to 9% for those making over $1 million a year, just to be clear. Yeah.
Yes.
For the people at home.
And This deal is a social contract. We have a situation where we took in about $3 billion more than was expected in taxes, and now we have this very unique, complicated, and I'd say confusing situation with the state budget. So we need our legislature to do better. That $3 billion is far more than what's projected to come in from the Fair Share Amendment. So in a relative sense, we would be much better off managing our budget well on a year-to-year basis than we would be passing this amendment, which I think we could all admit is fairly divisive. But given all the equities at stake and given the urgent needs with public education and transportation, I support this particular amendment.
Thank you. So two supported. Pat?
Oh, I absolutely support it also. And I think it's interesting that all this does is kind of mimic what the federal tax code is, because there you have different levels. You have a progressive income tax at the federal level, and I don't see an issue with having a progressive income tax at the state level. Yeah. I mean, maybe there needs to be other levels in between there. Maybe if somebody makes $10 million a year, they should go to 15% or something like that. But yeah, and as far as earmarking those funds, again, as Simon said, I would not typically want to earmark funds because money is fungible, as we know. And I think when we start doing earmarks, sometimes people start fudging with that money. But those are two very critical issues, transportation and education. So I would favor that.
Thank you.
Tom, before we leave, I just wanted for the record to apologize if I misrepresented what I said about the funding of infrastructure development. And I hope that, again, when this money comes, it will fund the appropriate infrastructure that it's meant to fund.
Okay. Thank you.
And I can get into the details later.
Thank you, Vivian. Our next topic has also been in the news recently, and it has to do with giving driver's license to undocumented immigrants. What are your thoughts about allowing driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants? The House and Senate held a ceremonial bill signing for legislation that would allow, starting on July 1st, 2023, next year, undocumented immigrants to apply for a Massachusetts standard driver's license. The governor had vetoed the bill, and the House and Senate overrode the governor's veto. So any thoughts about the driver's licenses issue?
I mean, I would not vote for that that question to repeal this. I know that's what you're talking about. There's a question, a petition going around right now to repeal that legislation that was passed. I favor the legislation. I think if you have anybody that is going to get a driver's license has to know how to drive a car, and they have to have insurance. So if you try to keep that away from somebody, they're going to not maybe learn how to drive a car the right way, not have insurance for their car, maybe not even register their car. So I think it's critical that those things all be done. And as far as the governor, one of his reasons for not signing it was that he said, well, then they can also register to vote. Well, I don't think so. I mean, we have plenty of people that are not citizens of the United States that have driver's licenses. And Vivian can probably attest to this before she became a citizen of the United States. Probably, I mean, I don't know, but
Yeah.
but that's a specious argument as far as I'm concerned. It's easy to keep it separate that people who have this kind of license cannot vote.
Yes, thank you. Simon?
When I prosecuted Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Arizona, I saw people living in the shadows. That is a risk to public safety. This law is a public safety measure. I agree with Pat. The arguments against it are specious. We need to make sure that everybody is safe. Having a license is a basic component of public safety. I've talked to law enforcement. I've talked to people who work in our election offices, because that's one of the main arguments, as Pat alluded to, is about the integrity of our election system. I guess I'd say this. As somebody who has prosecuted the highest level of election integrity cases, I have zero concern about the integrity of our elections as a result of allowing people to get driver's licenses.
Allowing undocumented immigrants.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
to
right.
get driver's license. Yeah, just
That's
to
right.
clarify. Thank you.
So I support the law that was passed, and I think that it should be ushered forward to completion.
Thank you.
Thank you again for the question. This touches my heart because, one, like I mentioned earlier in my introduction, and I'm an immigrant, a recent one. So one of the most misunderstood, first of all, let me say that I support the law that was passed, or, to provide driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants. And here's a background. One of the most misunderstood concepts is the immigration process. Because oftentimes people think it's just, if it's especially what has been termed as illegal immigration, people think of someone rushing through the border, the walls, border wall, and coming into the country. That's not true. So on my team, on the campaign team, I have what we call them a documented dreamer. They come with parents on the same visa. The process from the time you get into the country to getting a green card is lengthy, depending on what visa you come on. Okay. If it's a work visa, it's even longer to get to a green card. So in that process, if children come on their parents' visa, when they get to a certain age, and the immigration process is not complete, they fall off. And they have no other path. They came here legally, but they are now illegal. And those are many in our towns, in our communities here. We have many immigrants, whether they're from Europe, Asia, that are coming, and their children are falling off the immigration process. And these children are some of them have been through our public schools. And when they complete high school, then they become illegal because they've fallen off the immigration process. But should we deny them permits? Absolutely not. Then, because that means that we are not treasuring these people we have dined with, we have been in school with, we have had parties with, only because their status has changed. It is inhumane. Yes, some of them, there are many ways someone can come into the countries. But in affluent towns like these, people who came here and fell off the immigration curve really deserve to be treated like human beings with dignity. So among other things, immigration is long.
Yes, thank you, Vivian. Thank you. Well, our next topic has been in the news, and because it just recently passed in the State House, sports betting in Massachusetts. It has just been voted on favorably, as I understand it, in the State House. So I imagine it still has to go through the Senate and signed by the governor, et cetera, before it becomes law. So what are your thoughts? Oh, and there might be 20% of a tax on the sports betting to go to fund state programs for cities and towns, et cetera. So what are your thoughts about the sports betting bill that has been passed recently at the State House? Anyone?
Well, everybody else is doing it, all the states around us and states across the country. My understanding is that it probably will attract more people to come and place bets in Massachusetts because it's only a 20% tax on.
Oh, is it?
In most states, it's closer to 50%.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So that should attract more people to come here. Which, I mean, I guess if you talk in volume like that, it's going to be billions of dollars. But again, however we can raise revenue to give then back to the towns, but we want to do it safely too. I mean, we don't want to turn it, some people play the lottery and they get so addicted to the lottery that's all they're doing all day long is scratching their tickets, and then, they win $2 and they go buy $4 worth of tickets with that $2 they just won.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be sure that there are programs set up for people who may become addicted to it and just, do it too much and end up losing all their money to sports betting, because
Yes.
Tom Brady doesn't play for everybody, so
Yes.
not every team can win every week.
Thank you, Pat. Who's next?
I think we should keep in mind that gambling is basically a regressive tax. We know this empirically, that people who are struggling financially anyway are very likely to be the ones who are playing and losing when they're gambling. So I support the law. I think that it will be a step in the right direction fiscally for the Commonwealth. But like any other major legislation that passes, I think it is the legislature's obligation to keep very close tabs on what is happening and to make sure that we're not letting this get away from us, because there are going to be losers from a bill like this. So I support the legislation, and if I am elected, I will be watching closely what's happening within the Gaming Commission and where those dollars are going.
Thank you.
I will not waste time on this one. I agree with both candidates. What each of them has contributed is something I believe in. I believe in the cautionary and and in also, believing that it will bring in revenue.
Great. Wonderful. Well, our next topic is, do you support an annual review of state laws and regulations which currently apply to all of the businesses in the state, in an effort to delete the laws and regulations that no longer make sense and that are an undue burden on our local small businesses especially, but all businesses? So it has to do with reducing regulations that no longer make sense. And there doesn't seem to be a good process of going through that every year now. So what are your thoughts about that? Do you think that would be a worthwhile thing for our state representatives to look into?
I mean, I don't think it needs to be done every year. I think it needs to be done periodically, just as towns review their zoning laws periodically to find the ones that are obsolete. There used to be, until very recently, I think there was a law that you had to bring a gun into church on Sundays. In Massachusetts. Well, I hope that's not a law anymore. But things like that really have outlived their usefulness. So I think it's good to go through and do that periodically. And I think generally the different agencies do a reasonably good job of doing that. With the town, we deal a lot with the Alcohol Beverages Control Commission, for licensing restaurants and package stores, and they update their regulations on a periodic basis to try to keep up with the times. So, but definitely it needs to be done across the board.
Thank you.
Yes, it's a good idea. Let's talk about some other things that would help small businesses. Economic relief for small businesses, reducing the cost of childcare in Massachusetts, which is the second highest in all of Massachusetts, and it's stopping young parents from going back to work. This is part of the equation of why it's so hard for our small businesses to find employees. Our housing challenges and our transportation challenges, people being able to get to work from our district and also to our district, that's stultifying economic development in our communities. In addition to all that infrastructure, electric grid infrastructure and water infrastructure, in addition to sewer infrastructure, which is something I know the Select Board has been talking about quite a bit in regards to a few different facets of what's happening in the town, is really, really important right now in terms of attracting businesses that people in our district want to work at. How great would it be if we had more biotech firms that were located in Acton, in Chelmsford? Those are places where people who live here work. Why do we have to go to Burlington or Waltham, and why are they getting all of that excess tax revenue every single year? We should be doing more to build small businesses and employers here in our district, and we need great advocacy on the state legislature to help beef up our ability to do so.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I agree with the whole concept of reviewing legislation. When I had just moved to this area, I got to learn that there were gaps in the marriage legislation. Marriage age, what's the legal age? And I was so shocked that it was still on the books. A child as young as 12 years old,
in Massachusetts?
Oh, yeah.
Is it still on the books?
They just recently, I think last week, I have to double check on that.
Changed
that. But, we've been living in these towns with children, with parental consent, could be married at 12 or even younger. And that was, were people doing it? Probably not. But we don't know what happens behind closed doors. There were a few cases. That's why there were the national campaign to end that. And anyway, I jumped into action. When I learned about this, I created a Facebook group called Too Young, #TooYoung, just to raise awareness of this. And there were some people in the community who were not aware, that there was such a law. So we shouldn't give any potential room, because we have many cultures. We don't know who will jump into that loophole. So once in a while, we need to just review these legislations and just get them out of us, flush them out of the system.
Yes, and make it easier for small businesses to maintain their small business, because so many of them are burdened with so much red tape and paperwork that they can't stand it, and it takes up a lot of their time, and their time is money. So if you could reduce all that paperwork that is unnecessary, it seems to me we'd be helping our small businesses.
So that was just one part of the old legislation. So getting back to the businesses, I've talked to many businesses as part of my job at Acton TV, profiling them. Yeah. But as someone who tried to start a business, it was just I rent. The permissions have to go through the homeowner or the apartment owner. And if they say no, then you can't even register DBA because you need their approval. So you're on their mercy. So look at these people who are trying to create small businesses, and there's that roadblock. As a legislator, I want to look at. I don't have the answer right now, but it's something that I'm aware of. Yeah. And then going to the businesses that already exist, they don't have much support. From the state, unless they have some clout. Because even during the pandemic, they had to ask if you had, I think, more than a certain number of employees is when you qualified for certain help. And that is not acceptable, because they are all struggling. They are different businesses. They have different formats and different personnel needs, and they should all be given an opportunity to thrive. And we should break the very unrealistic and unequal, paperwork.
Thank you, Vivian.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll get to two more topics in just a few minutes, 3 minutes. And these are quick, I think, answers for you. What are your thoughts about the recreational marijuana being legal now in Massachusetts? Any thoughts about that? Yes, no, you agree, disagree? Anyone?
Well, I guess it's working for the communities that do have the option to have marijuana facilities in their towns. Chelmsford has never opted to do that. I know now the legislature did just make some changes to the law to kind of make it a little bit more restrictive on how much the communities can charge on their local impact fees, or whatever they call them, for those businesses. But it's another revenue source. Again, it's another one of those things, kind of like the gambling, that you just have to be careful about unintended consequences.
Yes, and also the legalization of marijuana itself for the users. I mean, if you could also bring that in too about it. But maybe we come back to you, Pat, and if you want to talk about that, about people using it, the marijuana now. Do we think that's a good thing recreationally for those who want to use it? You certainly don't have to.
Well, I think people are going to use it if they want to use it. And if they're not going to buy it legally, they're going to buy it illegally. So we might as well generate some revenue from people that are going to buy it.
I understand. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Well said, Pat. Myself, I don't partake, but I'm fine with other people doing so safely and now legally. There's obviously a revenue opportunity there, and so just like the gambling, as Pat said, it is something that the legislature has to be paying attention to. There is also economic opportunity here for some new entrepreneurs, new businesses, and that's something that can be opened up to more people. And so I applaud those who are venturing into that new economy.
Thank you, Simon. Vivian,
okay.
Quickly?
Yeah, quickly, I do support, the well-regulated use of marijuana and the legality of it. And I want to say decriminalize marijuana. There are so many incarcerated people on charges of marijuana use or sell, and most of them are people of color. And I think it's about time to review their cases, get them out of the jail, and make them productive. As someone who is passionate about restorative justice, this is one of the things I want to prioritize, so
Yes.
that once we make marijuana legal, get into that justice system, criminals, get people back into productive communities
Yes,
in a
very-
restorative way.
Yes, I agree, Vivian. It's terrible that we have people in prisons because of marijuana laws, and it's legal throughout most of the country.
Right.
Well, thank you very much for this very interesting candidate forum. The primary is Tuesday, September 6th. We have our 3 Democratic candidates here with us today. You all did an outstanding job. Thank you, Vivian Birchall.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Simon Cataldo.
Thank you, Tom.
And thank you, Pat Wojtas.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for watching. I'm Tom Christiano. Ciao.